It's a gospel on the radio talk show. A show about dreams and visions and a church that is indeed triumphant, alive, and well.
For the church triumphant is alive and well.
Hello, Tallahassee. This is the Gospel on the Radio talk show. I'm Pastor Jack King. I am your host, and it's always good to spend some time with you on a Sunday morning here on 94.1 on your radio dial. As I say, this is a show about dreams and visions and a church triumphant, alive, and well. We talk about the church and all the things that God's doing in His glorious kingdom. Show number 1,213 today, and going to be a little different. I have a guest in the studio that I've had a chance to just meet him. We don't know each other well, but we're going to get to know each other better. And he works for a ministry. I think it's a ministry. Maybe it's not. Ascension Sports. Now, I'm going to give you a little background, then I'm going to let him take it from there. He was a former coach. He's coached college level. And right now he's doing Ascension Sports. So he's going to tell us all about it. His name is Shane Burnham. And Brother Shane, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. Excited to talk.
Now, just getting to know you just a little bit, you're not a stranger to Tallahassee. You've lived here before.
That's right.
But you've just recently moved back.
That's right. As a kid, grew up here for a short time in my life. Actually graduated Lincoln High School in 1994 and went off to college, started working, coaching football, and, full circle. Came back here in 2021. To coach for Mike and part of the staff at Florida State.
Now, we know who Mike is, but people in Timbuktu, and they'd be listening on there, and they had no idea who Mike is.
Well, we came back to Tallahassee to coach for Mike Norvell as part of the Florida State football staff.
That's right. He is the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles.
That's right. And here we are. But had some time in Tallahassee, so this has been full circle for us.
Okay. Now, did you play football?
I did. So I played here as a kid growing up, all through the parks and recs of Tallahassee, over at Lincoln High School here locally, and then on to the University of South Carolina. Okay. That's where I played. I was a Gamecock. Okay. Played linebacker there from 94 to 97.
So linebacker is your position.
Linebacker, that's what I played, and ended up coaching a few other things. But linebacker's where I played. Now
let's go back to, did you say it was 94 you graduated?
94, yes, sir.
Now, you realize that Ford Ranger that you saw out there, that's a 94. That's how
it's paid for, baby.
Oh, yeah. Now, it seems to me like, I lived in Tallahassee in 94. The Lincoln was pretty good back in those days.
Yeah, we just hired a guy named Dave Wilson, who's a Hall of Fame coach here in the state of Florida. And Dave came on board, and Coach Wilson, I'd never call him Dave, but Coach Wilson was just a great influence on so many kids here in Tallahassee. He's still around and so beloved. But Coach Wilson did a great job with that program.
But how did Lincoln do during those days?
They were pretty good. weren't quite at the peak. He won a couple of state championships after I graduated.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
Had to get me out of there first, but did a good job. We won a bunch of games with him, and he did a great job. And Hall of Fame.
Right. Well, I remember there was a period of time in Tallahassee when all that seemed like so many teams were just doing great. Florida State was doing great. FAMU was doing great. North Florida Christian was winning some championships back in those days. And Lincoln, all of those schools were just in the limelight. And then it's funny how things move along, and then up and down.
We probably got spoiled here for a long time.
Yeah, right? I think we do. I really do.
If you grew up here as an older guy, Gene Cox, right?
Cox, yeah. He was a legend. Yeah,
legend, and just spoiled here in Tallahassee probably to have
Leon High School. Yeah,
there's so many great programs and coaches and players that have come through here.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that Tallahassee, to me, if I was an athlete, it'd be a place I'd want to come to because it's in Florida. Now, for you football players, when you come in for those 2 days, that's probably not a whole lot of fun, is it?
No, I tell you what. But I'd trade the heat for the cold. I'd rather take the heat if I was a football player.
I'm with you.
I've lived up north. My career's taken me different places, and we've loved every stop.
Right.
But I never got quite used to the cold weather. I prefer the warm weather.
So now you've always been a positions coach, never a head coach.
No, always a position coach, or I've coordinated special teams. That would be the extent of my coordinator, experience. But position coach primarily, linebackers, D-line.
Okay, now what was it that motivated you to want to go into coaching? I mean, you played, obviously, you loved the game, but
I tell everybody, when I look back as an 18-year-old kid coming out of high school and then going into college, growing up as son of a coach, almost every great relationship in my life, even now, but it's certainly at that time, had been birthed out of football. So I just, sat there as a coach's kid, saw the relationships and how deep and meaningful they were between dad and his coworkers, my dad and his players. I grew up with players in my home. I mean, whether he was coaching here locally at Florida State or other stops, that was one of the, bedrocks. The kids, his players would be at our house having dinner, and you just saw that and the influence that a coach could have. And so I got to see my hero, my dad, lead my heroes around the field. So I think for me, and just the passion that came with it.
I love to hear that. A kid saying, "My dad, my hero."
Oh, that's true. I mean, so that was my passion. I think, and part of it too, him being my hero, coaches are busy a lot. And I think one way to get my dad's attention, honestly, was, his passion was football. So my passion.
Wow.
Maybe there's some of that psychobabble there.
I may be getting to something sensitive here, but what's your dad is? How's he now?
No, he's still doing well. Dad's 84. He came in town last night. He's here in town this weekend. But Dad coached till he was 76, I believe. So he coached for a long time.
Right.
But doing well. He and my mother both. They've been married for a long time. Still happily married. And I won the lottery. I got very lucky.
Wow. Now you have siblings?
I have an older brother, older sister.
Any other coaches in the family?
No, my brother lives here. He's a recruiter reporter who covers recruiting. So he's loosely associated. He works for a website that covers college football recruiting exclusively. My sister lives up in Georgia. So we're all close. I've loved having my brother here. One of the reasons when I first came back to Florida State to coach, I actually lived with him for a year, and it was one of the, a great time for us.
Really?
So,
Now, the sister's not in sports at all?
No, but my niece is heavily involved in football, and she is working at the University of Georgia for Coach Smart as a operations assistant. But she's in her master's program. She'll probably be the best coach of all of us.
How about that? Now, your dad coached where all now?
So, we lived a nomad's life, I think I moved 9 times before I graduated high school. But when I was born, he was coaching at North Alabama.
Okay.
Then we went to East Tennessee State, Richmond. University of Richmond was next. From University of Richmond, we went to Memphis State.
Okay.
Then on to Lamar University. Then out to the USFL Arizona Wranglers. Then he came to Tallahassee with Coach Bowden. Then he went to South Carolina.
So mostly it was a smaller colleges. Now Memphis is, I guess, pretty big now.
Yeah, worked his way up. Started as a high school coach, and kind of gradually earned his way up. And then he finished. After he left Florida State, it was South Carolina, then South Florida, then Iowa State, and then Arkansas. So but it's been neat to see all these relationships.
I bet.
When I come back here to coach, and you feel like you've met all these former players that I grew up with. But you realize how impactful that relationship was for them and for Dad. So it's pretty neat to come back 30 years and see that, I guess, those little, acorns have grown into these oaks of relationships.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
It's one thing I've observed in sports is that there's a strong contingency of believers, and the ones who are, they kind of gravitate to one another. Have you noticed that? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense. Yeah. It does. I mean, whether it's through Athletes in Action or FCA, or I see a lot of those at a young. I was involved in that. I think that does a good job of pulling these athletes.
Yeah, FCA. Of course, my son is very involved in FCA, and he has a heart to reach young people. Mm-hmm. And FCA is a great way to do that, and coaching is a great way to do that too. And I know that heard Mike Krzyzewski talk about one time. He said, "Well, basketball is just a way for me to influence young people," and I like that concept that the young men, our young ladies, are first. You care about those young people that you are influencing.
There's you do this. You're providing for your family as a coach, or with what Josh does with FCA. But what's really satisfying, and some of the most rewarding calls or texts or letters you get, or you'll bump heads with a young man or a young lady because maybe they don't see things the way you want them to see things. They don't behave in a way you want them to behave. But you'll get these letters or calls years after the fact. 10, 15, 20, now that I'm up in age. But those are the most satisfying calls you get. But that, you can't put a price tag on that. It's just you do have the ability to so deeply affect someone's life. And, at a time in their life when they're, very impressionable, and some of these kids, whether it's in FCA or in high school or college, they don't have a solid background, a firm, foundation to stand on, whether it's just from a life perspective, or maybe it's from a faith-based perspective. They haven't been exposed to things that you can expose to them as a coach.
Having an opportunity to coach, interview Coach Bowden, that's one of the things that he really brought out really strong in that interview was his relationship with his players and how important it was. And he said that he'd always tell him, he says, every week I want you to write to your mama.
Yeah, that's right.
This is back before the days of email and that sort of thing. He said, every week I want you to write to your mama. But he talked about how a lot of the young men did not have father figures. And how important a high school coach is. I was up in Edison, Georgia one time, went to an event. It wasn't a sports event. It was I forget what the name of the ministry was. But after it was over, we were gathered, just a bunch of us standing in the middle of the gym, just talking. And the head football coach was there. And he was just talking about how that he is the father to a lot of those young men who would not have that type of influence otherwise. And so it just tells you how important the jobs that you do. When people see sports, they have to understand the big picture. And the big picture is young people or people who are being influenced, and a ball game is giving them the opportunity that they would not have had otherwise.
There's no doubt. And, I look at my own daughters. I have 16, 14, 9, and 7. And I want them involved in sports for so many reasons. But like you said, the life lessons you get, the teamwork, the hard work, the failure, that you have to overcome. There's so many things that sports in general, can provide. And then if you can add on top of that when someone like Coach Bowden or Coach Krzyzewski, who has a deeper mission than just life lessons, they might have, as they're calling to save young people. And I think when you talk like Coach Bowden, I remember there was a death here at Florida State. A young player got murdered, got shot, and I remember in all that tragedy, his leading conversation as he met with the team was, "If this was you, if you were Pablo, where would you be?"
I remember when that happened. Yeah.
So I think he takes these moments. Where he has this influence, and then takes it to another level.
Yeah.
You do stuff like that. So
he was a remarkable man, and I got a chance to meet him 2 or 3 times, and just as friendly. Everybody was somebody he knew, whether he knew you or not. You got that impression.
He's the best speaker, the best public speaker.
Yeah.
He could just have a whole room on the tip of his tongue. He was so funny, so
real,
down to earth, and genuine.
Yeah, he was just real.
I love it. It was special to grow up around here with him.
Yeah. So now you did not coach for Bowden. Your dad did.
Yeah, my dad coached for Bowden, so I just kind of grew up on the sideline watching Coach Bowden.
Yeah.
We lived on the same street. We grew up on the same street as Coach Bowden, so. I used to go hang his Christmas wreaths, and
oh really?
Yeah. So I mean, it was neat. Got some good stories,
I'll tell you a funny story about Joshua. We're talking about my son now. When he was a kid, he got a chance to play. What did he play? I should know this, a saxophone or whatever. But he got a chance to play it at Bobby Bowden's house,
right.
And he could not even open his mouth. Oh, yeah. He was so odd by that. And Coach Bowden came in and sat down with my wife there, and my wife would tell me he is so nervous. He said, "Well, it shouldn't be. It's just us."
Yeah, he always had that folksy, down to earth, personality, and I just loved it. Yeah. Every time I get a chance, I like to go back. If I can ever find his quotes, or if I can find a video of him speaking, I just thought his ability, he could captivate an audience. I just really thought he was an unbelievable public speaker.
Well, he's the reason why I became a fan of the Seminoles. I came to town, my wife and I, in 1979. I was not a football fan. I'm from Kentucky, and we bounced the ball. And come to town, and on the radio they were singing a song with Bobby Bowden. That's the coach for me. Bobby Bowden, please stay in Tallahassee. And of course, I think he was being courted by LSU or somewhere. But people say, well, he's kind of a lay preacher. And I heard that, and that's really what drew me to him. And found out, he'd go to churches and speak and stuff like that. And so I told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to root for these Seminoles. and it's been fun, because when you live in a community, you might as well just join them, because you're going to get caught up in the whole thing. But now let's talk about you. You've talked about your background, growing up here in Tallahassee and other places, living with your dad, traveling all over the place, be involved in the coaching business. You go into coaching, and your first coaching assignment was where?
I started at the University of Richmond.
Okay.
And lived in the bottom of the basketball arena because I got to live for free. I think I made $800 a month was my take home.
Wow.
But I got to eat at the dining hall once or twice a day as well.
Right.
So, there was no gas.
That's the Spiders, right?
The Spiders.
Richmond Spiders. And where are they at? Is it Virginia?
University of Richmond is right there in the heart of Virginia, actually on the west end of Richmond, Virginia. But a beautiful place, private school. Was there from 1998 to 2003. So I actually spent, quite my first job.
5 years.
Yeah, quite a bit of time.
And you were the...
I started as the outside linebacker coach and then ended up becoming the linebacker coach. You talk about relationships and why football, why sports, or that was a relationship of a coach that had worked with my father at some point as a young player. He had known me growing up, so it was just one of those relationships in football that became
right. And so that didn't help as far as getting the job. Was somebody you knew?
Somebody I knew,
and most jobs are that way,
right? That you talk about, the best thing you can give your kid is a good name, right?
Right.
We were talking, there's a verse that talks about that, and I think that's one thing my father gave me was a great name. So, and I've benefited that. Whether it was that opportunity, I've certainly benefited from that good name that my dad's given me.
So how did the Spiders do while you were there?
We did pretty good. We had a couple playoff trips. We had 2 playoff appearances in 1998, and then again, I believe in 2001. No, 2000 was the second.
That's a different level of excitement when you go into playoffs, isn't it?
It is, and at that level, I'd played at South Carolina, so it was neat just because I'd never been a part of the playoffs in college, right? There was a bowl system, and now this was 1AA football, FCS football, so there was a playoff, which, it's kind of neat. 16 teams, I think, at the time came in, and it was single loss elimination. It was kind of neat to experience that.
Yeah. So as you were was it 2A? Was it go 2A?
Yeah, 1AA.
Yeah, 1AA, yeah.
So, you had 63 scholarships, a little bit smaller ball, high academic school.
Yeah.
But, it's funny, when I was coaching, I did not redshirt. So, I was a young coach, 22 years old, my first job. And so I was coaching young men my same age that, we graduated.
Oh, I bet that was fun.
It was fun. It's fun. Some of those relationships have been some of the longest lasting because, it was such my first job.
Okay, now for those who do not know anything about football, what's a red shirt?
A red shirt means you take a year where you're on the practice squad.
Right.
Does not count against your eligibility. So you get 4 years to play, and typically they give you 5 years to matriculate through the school.
Right, and during the COVID years, every guy's playing 7, 8 years.
You see some of that. It was during the COVID.
Yeah, especially for Wake Forest.
Yeah, Wake Forest, man. They had it going there for a couple of years.
Yeah. But the thing is that because you started a place like Richmond, and I'm assuming that somewhere along the line somebody said, hey, Coach Burnham, we need somebody, and you step up a little bit. So where'd you go next?
From there, I went to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And again, this was a relationship where the head coach at Richmond was let go, so we were all looking for a job. The new head coach at the Citadel happened to be on the staff that I played for in college. So went down to the Citadel in 2004 and met my wife, actually, my future wife. So that was a great move, memorable move. So met her through a coaching buddy. I keep going back to the, all these things.
It all relates, doesn't it?
Yeah. So a coaching friend of mine introduced me to my future wife when I was coaching at Charleston, or the Citadel in Charleston. We loved it there. I mean, that's a military school, and the kids you meet in that program, because they're cut from a different cloth. They're waking up in the morning, they're in full dress. It's not the military academy per se.
Right.
It's not Air Force, Army, or Navy, but it's a huge commitment for those kids.
But you didn't have to wear a uniform.
No,
like
I did.
Yeah.
No, but it was just neat to be around that.
Sure.
Just to see kids that sold out to whatever they thought their future.
And learning or observing the discipline to be in the military.
It is, and it's a real deal the way they attack it at the Citadel. So I enjoyed that, just to be around that. It was different, right? So again, it was my second job. Now I'm experiencing something different with these young men. It was a good stop. Only there for a year.
Okay.
But like I said, my wife teases me. She left. She moved to North Carolina as I was coaching at the Citadel, and then I took a job the next year at Elon University.
Wow!
And she claims I was chasing her around the country, but I wasn't. I was just taking another job.
Okay, so you met while you were at the Citadel. Now, what was she doing?
She was in school, so she was getting her master's.
Was she in the military mode?
She was over at MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina.
Okay.
So she happened to be getting her master's.
So she was never in the military, so you didn't have to take orders from her.
No, not until after I got married. Not until I signed up. But no, so that was great. I went up to Elon because she was now working up in Greensboro, and I went to Elon, which is about 30 minutes away. Another 1AA FCS school. So my first 3 stops, smaller level ball, trying to build your way. And then we actually got married on Elon's campus, which is a beautiful campus up at Elon. Actually, the Fighting Christians, if that was their original nickname.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the Elon Fighting Christians. Now, when I was coaching there, they had become the Elon Phoenix, but originally
the Fighting Christians.
Fighting Christians. In fact, if you go back and Google it, they have some of the old logos. It looked almost like a monk. Was their logo. But yeah, the Fighting Christians. So we worked at Elon and got married there. And that's a great stop.
The Fighting Christians. I have to think on that.
That was it. Elon, now they're the Phoenix because they came out of the the fire. But we spent our first 3 stops, or my first 3 stops doing that.
Now, how long have you been married now?
We got married in 2007, so we're coming up on almost not quite 20 years, but 18 years this spring.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good start.
Yeah, March 7th.
That's March about 20 years less than my wife and I have been married.
Okay,
but I always tell people, well, I think it's going to work. so far, so far, so good.
We've 4 kids later, and then it's when we got married there at Elon, we got married on the chapel on campus there. Just a beautiful venue. So again, every stop we've made, I've enjoyed.
Right. So now you decided to give up on football for a while.
Yeah.
Now what brought that about?
Here recently, you're talking about?
Yeah.
So
I'm skipping some of the history. I mean, we may come back to some of that, but right now let's move on to Ascension Sports.
Move on to Ascension Sports. Last spring of 2024. I was really looking for a lot of things, but one of them was more stability. We'd moved a lot, 7 times. Didn't necessarily want to keep doing that with my family. They love Tallahassee. They're thriving. My girls are doing well. But ultimately, just thought I wanted to put down roots, wanted to spend more time with my family, and wanted to still affect kids in the same way that I thought I was able to affect them as a coach, like we've discussed. I didn't want to. I enjoyed that piece of what I do. I didn't want to leave that behind.
Right.
As I tried to reinvent myself in this second act at 48 years old. So Ascension Sports, what it allows me to do is basically my task at Florida State from Mike Norvell was to help bring players to the transfer portal.
Oh, really?
Help them. I'd identify players and I'd help recruit them, and then at some point bring them across the transfer portal to Florida State.
Now let's set something up here. Again, I'm sensitive to my audience that are sports people. And that term may not be something that people know because it's a fairly new term, about 5-6 years. So what is the transfer portal?
It just gives ability for these young men to go between one school to the next without penalty. And for the longest time in college football, to leave one school and go to the next, you'd have to sit out for a year.
Right.
Give yourself up a year of eligibility. And about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, they made it possible through what they called the transfer portal for these young men to jump from one school to the next, and they can do it unlimited, actually. But that just added a whole new wrinkle to college football. About the same time that happened, they started this NIL, where these young men are under contract.
Name, likeness.
Name, image, and likeness.
Image and likeness. And I remember the controversy as it was progressing along. It took about 2 years for the whole thing to develop from the time that I first heard about it until it actually began to happen. Some people were for it, some people are against it still.
Yeah, it's still, somewhat, I guess, much talked about, but certainly here to stay. And, it's the way the game's changed where these young men are, under contract and they get paid while they're in college.
Because before this, the young athletes their compensation, if they're on scholarship, was the college to be able to pay for the college education.
That was the extent of it.
And that was the norm for 50 years or more?
For as long as I can remember.
Okay. And then people began to look around and say, well, I should get paid for this. And now, is this across all the NCAAs or is it just the top division? Yeah,
so what's fascinating is you really only see it. It's legal across all division, Division I football. But there's very few programs who really can subscribe and support this true NIL and fund it. So there's certain schools that do and certain schools that can't. But ultimately, these young men, that's what they're doing now. They have this ability in college sports and women to go between one school and the next without penalty. And not only without penalty, in a lot of cases, they're being enticed and or, they're benefiting financially.
Right.
So it's just they're basically professional athletes in college now is what's happened.
Yeah.
And I think what we try to do is help these young people make the most educated decision. If you're going to do that,
right,
let's make sure
we meaning Ascension Sports.
Yeah, if we being Ascension Sports,
right.
if we are going to transfer, if you're going to try to do that and take part in that world, let's don't do it blindly. Let's look before we leap.
Right.
And that's what we do at Ascension Sports.
Now, would you be considered an agent?
I think, that's a term that I'm comfortable with. We represent representation, agency, consultation. I think it's a little bit of all that. But certainly we do act as an agent in that space.
And now what brought this about for you? How did you get involved in this?
Well, I think, again, when it goes back to young people, I'm seeing at Florida State, my experience at Florida State University back in 2021 through 2024. This is when this all happened. This was when it was all coming about. And I saw firsthand exactly how a young man or woman can benefit from that experience. But I also saw how young people were not benefiting. They weren't informed in what they were doing. And ultimately, I feel like if 10 kids on average were to go through this portal NIL process and try to make that decision, 8 out of 10 come out worse on the other side.
Oh, really?
I think on the whole, the portal has hurt college athletes.
Really?
I think it's, for a lot of reasons, kids won't stick it out. They want to leave, and they make these uneducated decisions, and they come out either in a worse situation than they were in previous, or they don't come out at all, and they don't matriculate to the next college.
And the worst situation would be with perhaps maybe they were playing for this team, doing pretty good. They go to another team, and now they're not doing so good.
Or you'll see kids go in the portal, and they'll give up a scholarship, and nobody else will put them back on, so they'll never reappear. So you see some kids will disappear altogether. When I say disappear, I mean they go in the portal, and they'll go somewhere else and have to pay their own way and or not play football
wouldn't
anymore.
They have that settled before they made the leap?
So that's
that's where you come in.
That's why Ascension's there. So, and then what you saw was, and that's what I saw. That's what this was born out of. I saw all these kids, in some cases, making, whether it was by luck or by education, great decisions that benefited them both in the short term and the long term. And then I saw the exact opposite more than that. People making poor decisions. So that's what it birthed from. Yeah. And what has happened for us, it gives me satisfaction in that the way we do it, we're helping a kid still achieve his dream, make the most educated decision that turns out for him being the right decision. Right. So for me, it still gives me the benefit and the satisfaction of helping a kid improve himself, helping a kid realize his dream, helping a kid win.
Wow. Because I think the average person, such as myself, would have never even considered what you've just talked about. I mean, I didn't even think about that aspect of it. But what my question is, how in the world do these coaches ever put a team on the field anymore? Because it seemed like at the end of our season this last year, I say our Florida State, I mean, there was just a whole bunch of people just up and left. And I think Leonard Hamilton experienced some of that last year. It's just you built around your team. You got these expectations for the season. All of a sudden, they're gone.
Yeah, I think it's one of you see coaches retiring / leaving the profession right now. I think some of the frustration, and I know it is, when I talk to my friends, when you get into coaching, again, it's about the relationships. You're a teacher. You're trying to help a kid's light come on. You love seeing a kid get better.
Right. That's
usually the number one reason we get into coaching is we did that relationship that we loved as a player. We want to see that as a grown person. And then the second, a lot of times you're competitive, and you love that arena, being in that competitive environment that you don't always get. But I just think I lost my train of thought there, but
you just talking about the whole thing about the relationship between.
I think that the relationship means less than it used to, because
there you go. Yeah.
The finances mean more to the kid, and I understand that's frustrating for those guys, because even though you're doing a great job in building a relationship, even though you're doing your job trying to make a kid better, sometimes that's not enough.
But here you're the line coach, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you got your line. Mm-hmm. It's looking good. And then all of a sudden, a kid comes to you and says, I think I'm going to Auburn. Mm-hmm. And how does that make you feel?
Yeah, that's why that's tough for those guys to swallow, because you do feel like, well, what could I have done more? I couldn't have done more. But that's the new reality, right? That's the reality of, and I think part of the frustration is you and I maybe have had taken jobs over the years as an adult, and there was a contract we signed, and there was an end game, or most young people that I deal with over the years, my children, the players I've coached, myself, you don't see very far down the road. And I don't think these young people whether it's because they don't have the advice around them to give it to them, or they just don't think about it, they cannot see long term
because they're young. They're just young.
Future. So
I mean, some of them
give them good counseling.
Some of them are still teenagers.
Oh, yeah, they're still kids.
Yeah, I mean, who can make a good decision when you're talking about the contract? The only job I've ever had to require a contract was the Navy, and I know I wasn't thinking when I did that.
That's right. But it's true though. It's it's the relationship does not mean as much as it used to, so that's frustrating for coaches. And then I think obviously when you see not only the relationship not mean as much, but when you're a professional coach and you're trying to develop a guy, you almost feel like you did help him get there because you brought him to that place, and it's just frustrating.
And then it's also the overall climate in the locker room, because you got these guys that say, if I don't like that, I'll just leave, and that's the mindset I would think. And I'm not in the locker room, I don't know, but you have been.
Well, I think you're in a very mature business world, but very immature in how these kids approach it, if that makes sense. So there's real money and there's real contracts, but got these young people who don't know how to handle that. They don't know how to handle that someone's making more and maybe they don't think they should be. Mm-hmm. How do I express myself? Or I'm playing and this young man's not, and he's still making more than me. There's a lot of feelings involved at this age. They're very emotional.
See that. Yeah. So, but now, are there recruiters out there? I mean, there are people like somebody from another college coming to your players at your school and trying to entice them away? Yeah,
and that's we used to laugh when I first got here at Florida State. We'd have the conversation was, who should we be concerned about on our team that might be going in the portal, who might be transferring. And, we came to realize after a couple of years that even a young man who's happy at his current institution, probably someone that's out there trying to.
So they're coming along and saying, hey, if you come play for us, we'll give you such and such a thing.
And then a lot of that's verbal, and there's no follow through. These poor young men.
In the NCAA, is that allowed? Is that legal?
It's not legal.
But they do it.
It's a lot of people through social media or high school coaches or there's a lot of back channels, teammates.
Wow.
So I feel badly for these young men because again they are being told a lot of things that they can't be sure are true.
Right. But now, is there any recourse, like on if you're the coach and you know that somebody has been doing this, is there any recourse for that coach?
You certainly can try to report. There's that you can self-report or report on.
But how's that go?
And I think very little has been done to this point. There's been very few instances where you can see a school got their wrist slapped for doing that. Wow. So I think it's pretty rampant right now.
Really? So now, for you to make this decision, this had to have been a hard decision for you to make, or was it?
Extremely difficult. No, it was extremely difficult. It was very emotional. And Josh, actually, just saw your son Josh at a school function. He prayed over me, which was fantastic. But it was very hard. This is a career I've poured 27 years into. I love what I do. It's a labor of love, coaching. My kids love it. It's just it's a family business, and it was really hard to go and leave all that behind, all you've known, all you've been passionate about and pursued for all those years. But I felt convicted at some point that young men needed this in this space, that there was a need for it, and that I was still helping kids. And part of what we do is we still coach and we still train guys. So I'm hoping I can find a little bit of all I left behind in some of the things we're doing in this space, whether it's training kids, whether it's helping them make this move from school to school, whether it's helping them financially. In some of these cases, these kids are coming from depressed backgrounds where if done right, maybe they graduate college and now all of a sudden there's enough money to go start a home, buy a car, get a leg up on life. That's hard, and a lot of kids come out of school with debt, and some of these young men have a chance to really get a leg up if they do it the right way.
Yeah, because not everybody ends up in the NFL.
That's right. No, and exactly. Yeah. So again, some of these guys can just go put a nice nest egg away, and and really get a leg up and start.
It's hard to imagine that you could have a kid that's our young man is 18, 19 years of age, and all of a sudden they got $100,000 coming their way. And how do you handle that? And how much influence do these parents have to help them to manage? Because that's an awful lot of money to put in the hands of a teenager.
I think that's where I think we've done a disservice, and most schools try to educate their young men on how to handle this finances, but again, you're putting a lot of money in some very young people's hands who don't have a great background in a lot of cases of what those finances can do, whether that's taxes, whether that's financial investment planning. There's things they don't understand.
Sure.
Maybe their people at home don't. The other layer is, you're right. There are some, how do you manage that where you protect yourself from people that love you,
right?
That, are.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking back to myself at that age, and things you learn. I remember when I first went on the ship, because being a believer, I didn't go to the bars. I didn't spend my money. I had money, and of course, all the other guys wanted to come borrow my money from me. And I learned, don't lend these people money; they're not going to pay you back. And then when you say, "Hey, will you pay me?" Then they go, "Well, I thought you was a Christian, and here you are." What, But all that's confusing for a young person to try to have to figure your way through all of that. And I'm sure they're having to deal with all of this, and that's a lot of pressure to put on a young person.
It is, and you like for them to be a young person and let them just focus on that. So if you can hopefully get them where they don't have all those things, they can be a young person, study, pursue their passion, sport, whatever it might be, and take some of those things off their plate.
Sure.
And,
But now, for them to be a partner with you, what does that require? Is there a contract involved in this?
Yeah, there's a contract. So, I'd say we recruit you. So in other words, we identify talent, players, young men that we want to work with, and then as we start to delve into that, make contact, begin a relationship, we know athletically they're young men that we'd like to pursue because we can help them in the process on the sports side. And then if they're a person or a family that we want to work with, that's what's great about this. You're not bound to anybody. We're trying to find folks that we think have similar values and what we want out of the process.
Now, a couple of times you've mentioned we. So who is we?
We. So got two partners.
Okay.
We have a basketball arm that does this for high school and college basketball players. I'm the football piece, and then we have an operating partner who runs our facility out of North Carolina. So the three of us.
Out of North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Now, how did that connection happen?
Coaching. Another one of those things where I coach with this Neil Cornatzer, my partner. We coached together back at Richmond, believe it or not, my first job. And then fast forward, we've stayed in touch all these years. He, without getting too off in the weeds, I've been torn for a long time about whether I should stay in coaching or I should get out of coaching. It's always been a heavy on my heart about whether it's right for my family, for my girls.
Right.
He's seen me go through this, and I think he saw, just became convinced that this would be a great opportunity. Right. So he convinced me to come. But that's Nick.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Neil. So, but the three of us kind of founded this and have started this.
Okay. Let me go ahead and tell the audience. I mean, I'm just sitting here. I'm just listening to what you're saying. I'm enjoying it so much. But I'm going to just tell the folks, this is The Gospel on the Radio Talk Show. I'm Pastor Jack King. I am your host. And I have been for, as I say, 1,213 shows on different stations, of course. And Shane Burnham is my guest. He's with Ascension Sports. And I told you last week, I said, this is a show like we don't normally do, but we interview people, but to get into the nuts and bolts and the weeds of sports, we don't generally do that. And normally I play gospel music on the show, but I'm not going to do it today. And you have to know, this is a lot for me to forgo my gospel music, so I apologize to my gospel music fans, but I feel like we got more than we need to discuss, and we got just about 20 minutes left on the show. And I want to get into this NIL, is that right? Okay. When I first heard about this, and I remember who was the famous Gator player that who am I thinking?
Recently?
Yeah.
The quarterback.
Tebow. I heard an interview with him, and he was opposed to it then. I don't know where he is now on it, but at that time he was opposed to it. But my understanding was that if a young player wanted to do this, then he would be contacted by people who were advertisers, and they'd come to him, and it would be a relationship between the advertiser and the athlete. But it didn't turn out that way, and now it's actually the universities themselves that are brokering these things. And in other words, they say, we have money to offer you, and to me, that's what corrupted. Can I use that word? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think the way it was intended and the way it's been executed, two different things. Exactly right.
Yeah.
I think they intended for if a young man, just like any other student on campus, could benefit from their ability with a local partnership with a company, then certainly that company would come, make contact, and that young man or young woman could benefit that way.
Right.
What happened quickly was...
How did they get off track?
I think what happened quickly was colleges and universities said, okay, here's what we can do. We can go out and crowdsource, ask boosters to dump money into this collective, this pot, and then we can then pay our players directly from that pot to do things around the university, around the city that are compliant with the NCAA, but not necessarily...
They found a way around it, didn't they?
Yeah, they weaponized it. So that's when, once the first school kind of figured it out, everybody started jumping in line.
Right.
But ultimately, they took what was supposed to be organic, local player, local business, find a synergy, and said, no, that's not.
So the idea of the amateur athlete just went out the window.
Yeah, totally. This is pro football.
But the thing about it is that not every young player playing on that team is going to be a part of this, because you got a lot of young players, they don't have that type of talent.
Sure.
Maybe they work hard, and that's how they got their position to be able to play, but there's no name, likeness, image concerning them because they're not at that level. How in the world do you distinguish this as far as the players? I mean, you got the same people in the same locker room. This guy's making $100,000. This guy's making a scholarship, basically.
Sure.
And how does that work in the dynamics of the locker room?
Yeah, well, it's certainly NFL model where we're not all here, we're not all equal.
Right.
There's an NFL pay scale. Quarterback gets paid the most. Offensive tackle gets paid the second. So on, on defense, we're going to pay a DN first that can rush the passer, a DN, a D tackle that can play 3 downs second, so on and so forth. So what happened in college football is it became very NFL-like, where the guys who were producing, and that's where they were going to put their money.
Right.
And for players, while that is upsetting, and certainly, not for the benefit of all of them, for the guys who played, who saw the benefit. That's just, it went that way quickly to where, and again, that's why some of these coaches have left the business, and that's why some of these players, you see them transferring. Maybe it's for not the right reason. They can't handle the things we're talking about. But ultimately, it went from being what should have been organic, let's use your personal brand to partner with another business brand in the community, to know, let's crowdsource this, let's fund this, and then try to give as much money as we can to the very best players.
Well, how do you see this 10 years from now? Is this going to work?
I think 10 years from now, that's a great question. Yeah, it's going to work. They've got to put guardrails on it. They've got to put some type of transparency into this, where there's a market, a known market, where these schools have contract agreements with the athletes that protect the athlete. And so the young man knows what he's signing into, and it's standard across college football. I think you'd also like to see that the finances are out there as well. It's not only a standard contract, but a market set forth where these young men know what they can expect to make reasonably when there's less guesswork.
And how are we going to address this as far as one university who has lots of money and another university does not have it? Like in the NFL, I mean, there's a cap. Yep. One team can only spend so much. Is that coming?
So I think what you'll have is this rev share agreement that starts in June or July.
Okay, what's that? Well, I don't know anything about that.
They've now allowed, starting in July, schools can now pay directly to their student athletes. That's going to be the first time they've done that. So these NIL collectives that have been around the last 3 or 4 years, and the most schools will shut those down, and they'll now be not employees, but they'll be paid directly from the school. So, and what you're seeing right now certainly is there's the haves and have-nots.
Sure.
They just can't. Some schools can't fund that revenue share money all the way to what's allowed.
There's no way.
So there's going to be disparity.
Yeah.
And then I think what you'll eventually see 10 years from now, there'll be a break. The big 4 conferences, the Power 4, they're going to break from the NCAA, in my opinion, and they'll become autonomous. They'll rule themselves. They'll govern themselves. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes coming.
Yeah. So the possibility there could be another league that does it the old-fashioned way.
There could be.
Yeah, I mean, because your Division II leagues, and they're not dealing with all this as much. I mean, I guess it could be there, but
it probably won't be. You're right. It'll probably be. There'll be a distinct separation.
Right.
When I was a young guy, there was Division I, there was Division II. There was these different levels. Then it became one.
Right.
But I do think you're going to have a total break of these 40, 60 schools, whatever that number ends up being, that will support this model.
Yeah.
They'll have a more organized way to support the model you and I are talking about.
Because like in basketball, the sweet or the March Madness,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that thing was built on the Cinderella story,
Mm-hmm.
And everybody loves to watch the Loyolas and teams like that. They come up and they never get all the way, but they make a show it. Okay, when you start paying athletes these types of money, and one school can pay 5 or 6 that are almost professional basketball players to go against the other teams that cannot put up that kind of money, you're going to distort the whole thing, because it's going to be the same schools year after year after year, and it just takes all the mystery out of it. To me, it's kind of wrecking the system, would be my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be much harder, I think, going forward for the have-nots to.
Yeah.
The gulf will get deeper and deeper and wider between those programs. I know basketball, like you said, a little bit different than football, but I do think that's why you're going to see the football playoff continue to grow. I think we're at 12 teams right now for the college football playoff.
Yeah,
I think it'll continue to grow because they're going to want that piece of it to be
Right.
there. The Cinderella story, whether it was Boise
Right.
State this year or
Right.
I think that's
well, you saw this year, and I did not pay that much attention to it, but it seemed to me like that of the 12 teams, 6 of them were gone. I mean, and at that first round, it was blowouts. So you saw the diversity right then and there, and then you start getting into the higher priced institutions that has money to spend.
And even the national champion team was Ohio State, I believe, right? And
Right.
You can't confirm some of these things right now, but the word on the street is they had by far the highest payroll in college football.
And is that public knowledge?
No, it's not.
Okay.
That's why there needs to be some transparency.
Right. Oh, yeah, you can see change has got to be coming.
Yeah.
In other words, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to fix it.
So I think they're getting their arms around it, but it's certainly the horse got out of the barn, so to speak, before they could get their hands around it. But it's just a fascinating time. It's
okay. Now let's talk about your role here. So as a person involved in Ascension Sports, and you're the football guy for them. How are you going to go about your job? What is the plan?
Yeah, so we're trying to build the plane while we're flying it right now. So ultimately, we've gone from the portal season, which is December and January. Now we are actually meeting with all our guys physically, going around the country.
So you have young men, or maybe young women too, who are signed up with you now.
Yeah, I have 24. I represent 24 athletes across college football. And what I've done now that 22 went through the transfer portal, which is how they came in touch with me and our company. But we now, in the January period, we went out physically, had meetings, talked about financial planning. Now that they've come into this money in the portal,
right.
We have a financial planner we work with. So that was a January meeting where we tried to set the game plan for their finances so they could head off some of the stuff you and I were talking about budget and
right.
Taking care of their money. That was January. Now in February, March, we're back into a high school mindset where we're trying to go find some high school guys. I'm recruiting some high-end high school
now, do
players.
you help them with the negotiation?
I do. Yeah, so
as we go into where the college has contacted them, or they've contacted the college, and they're going to go through you.
That was fascinating. Once they go through the recruitment and they come down to the financial piece of it, they bring us in, and we help them on the front end decide where to go and who to visit based on some parameters we set out. But ultimately, when it comes down for them to get offered their job, there is a contract presented to them that we are part of that process. We either approve the contract or disapprove, tell our client what we think of it from a legality standpoint, and then financially, what we think is real and what the value should be.
Okay, so what's your learning curve been in this so far?
Fascinating.
What have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned that it's the Wild West, right? There really is no market, that every kid's recruitment is different based on who he is and who the school is involved. But what I've learned is relationships carry, right? They matter, and some of the relationships that I've been able to develop, I've learned that in this process, that those are real and they matter. But I've learned in the NIL side of things is that it's the Wild West and not many people. There's no one way to do it. is wildly different from school to school, and there needs to be structure. I think just
Right.
for kids to have any peace of mind going through the process, I've learned there needs to be structure and transparency in it.
Okay, now I want to give you an opportunity to do a little salesmanship here.
Okay.
All right. Let's just hope that there's going to be some parents, perhaps, that are going to be listening to this interview, because it's going to be on a podcast. Okay.
Right.
And of course, there's some people hear it on the air on 94.1, and then there's going to be on a podcast. So sell it right now to that parent. And you might have their collective ear right now. Why would they want to go with you?
I think college football's changed a sea change in the last 4 years, whether that's collectives, revenue sharing, the transfer portal. I think the ability for the student athlete to control the narrative and to control their recruitment
Right.
Is more powerful than ever. I think our ability to advise in the recruitment process, the portal process, collective negotiations, NIL partnerships, brand management, training, pre-draft process, agency selection.
Right.
I think our ability to provide those services in this.
Okay, now why are you better than somebody else?
27 years of being in it. We have real relationships. We have real knowledge. I was on the tip of the spear at Florida State and experienced it in real time as it was happening.
Right.
I think most other people in this space are marketing agents, so
Right.
to speak, because of the NIL world that it was born out of. But ultimately, we're different because of the relationships, the knowledge, the credibility I have. I can cut through the static, whether it's a recruitment for a high school kid or a college portal player. My friends and relationships across college football cut through. People will pick up the phone.
Right.
They're going to trust my evaluation. They're going to watch the tape. It's not going to change what the answer is going to be. The answer is going to be yes or no based on their evaluation
Right.
of that tape.
Right.
But our ability to provide that kind of access and the information that we have.
Right.
And I think when you have 24 or 5 kids go through that portal in this first,
but now
we gain a lot of knowledge from that as well.
Are there young people who are trying to do this without the benefit of the experience?
Most. I think
Really?
most are doing it without.
Really?
This isn't whether it's true or not. I saw it on Twitter, so it must be true. If you go through this with a representation, if a student athlete in college football at least goes through this with a representation, they typically make 4 to 5 times more in that negotiation than those who don't.
Really?
They do. We can be the voice of reason. We can be the bad guy. We can go in there and have uncomfortable conversations that maybe that student athlete doesn't want to have with his future
Right.
employee. There's a certain conflict of interest there already.
So the student athlete may be depending on their parents
in a lot of cases,
who have no experience at all.
Right.
Maybe experience in life, maybe.
Yeah.
But you're right. The background that you have, the knowledge that you have, the ins and outs, not everybody has that.
I think that makes us different. Unique.
Yeah.
I hope it does.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it does.
Now, what does your ministry or company gain from this? I mean, I'm sure there's a percentage.
From financially, the way we make it a business, we agency commission structure. So we'll work off commission.
Okay.
Much like an NFL agency or
Right.
real estate agent, but a brokerage of some sort.
Okay.
So there's a commission structure.
And I'm going to interject something here from just from conversation, just listening to you, that where there may be an agent whose their thought is, man, I can make some money here. I'm thinking that your way of thinking is different. That you want to do this. You want to make a living for your family, but
Right.
you want to be able to. You have a genuine desire to help these young people because you've lived it. I mean, you've been right there by them. You've coached them. You've seen them make the wrong mistakes. And am I right here?
Yeah, you're right. No, in a perfect world, what I wanted to be able to do is make kids better.
Yeah.
I want to make kids better, and that's what you do with your coaching, and that's what we can do in this space is make a kid's life better, make his future better, and that's ultimately what we can do.
Now tell me about the other two partners.
So Neil Kornatzer, who is the operating partner, Neil was a coach, played at Appalachian State, got into coaching at the college level. Then
Football or basketball?
Football.
Okay.
So he comes from, he has 2 young children who play in high school. One's a volleyball player, one's a football player. So when he opened up our facility about 4 years ago, it was really, for him, it was a passion project for his children. He wanted his children to have a great place, and his community up in North Carolina, a small community, Davie County, is where he lives. So for him, it started Neil as a chance to really pour back into his community I don't think he ever saw this piece of it coming.
So he opened up a facility.
Yeah,
You mentioned
facility.
that. You told me about this the other day.
Yeah, he has an indoor facility, 10 basketball courts, 2 indoor football fields, a weight
Wow,
room.
how in the world did he finance that?
yeah, it's quite the, it's great, and it's a great resource
and so
for our players.
that ministry launched this ministry.
It did.
Okay, now tell me about the other guy.
And then Fred Cannon, who does basketball for Ascension. Fred was in with Neil. He was running some training basketball players, doing some tournaments in Neil's facility, and they started a relationship. And at some point, that was born out of that business relationship.
And he's basketball.
And he's basketball.
And the other guy's what?
And then Neil, he really just operates our facility.
Okay, so he's the one that's
more the operating partner.
But he's the founder. Yeah. Okay. So basically, right now you're doing football and basketball.
Football and basketball.
Is there anything else like volleyball or that?
We have
hockey, maybe.
We just started our baseball and volleyball division. So those we hired on, and that's the ultimate goal for Ascension, to be a hub of all sports, to be based out of this facility in North Carolina. Not that we can't go everywhere. We have clients from all over the country, but that's going to be the home base where we can really pour into kids. I think ultimately what we're trying to do is, how do you add to kids? So we add in a contract negotiation. We add in how we help them, financially. We're trying to help build young people.
Right.
And that's really just the hub. So Fred runs that basketball. Neil makes it all come together. I'm trying to drive the football. As we add volleyball and baseball into it here in the last couple of weeks, I think we'll continue to grow that out. And just we'd like for it to be a family atmosphere for our people. So
how would they get in touch with you?
AscensionSports.com, I believe, is our website. I should know that off the top of my head, but our website is the best way. And obviously, if you want to get a hold of me, I'm on social media at Coach Shane Burnham 52. At Shane Burnham 52. At
Shane Burnham, BURNHAM 52. Okay,
that's right. And that is the best way to get to me personally. But again, our website, AscensionSportsConsulting.com.
And your counsel would be, don't try to do this on your own. If you're in that situation,
do not. I think look before you leap, make an educated decision.
Right. Yeah. For sure. And one of the things I asked Shane when he first came in here. Now we met the other day, and that's how people end up on this show. Right. I kind of have this philosophy: if I meet you and you're involved in something, then you're supposed to be on this radio show. That's just rule. Okay. And he's a friendly guy. I'm a friendly guy. We sat there. We had a conversation. But the thing is that I asked him, I said, are you a believer? And to me, that was a very important question. And of course, he explained to me that his dad he's grown up in a Christian home. Well, to me, that's a selling point, especially coming from this perspective on this show, that you are a person who you do believe in the Christian faith. You believe in the tenements of Christ Jesus. And I think that for a parent, if that was my child, I'd want to know that, because that'd be very important to me, because honesty and integrity is what we learn and teach in the Christian faith. And that's what Jesus teaches us. And so, again, I'm helping you sell this.
No, I appreciate it. And it's funny, when I look back on these things, I use the term God winks. There's been so many things, whether it's here in this business in the last 6 months, or whether it's through my life. There's so many little moments where I feel like God speaking.
Yeah. Now, are the other two gentlemen believers?
They are. They're both believers, and great family men, both married kids, and it's a good group of guys to be with.
Because I asked him about the name Ascension, because where my mind immediately went, the Lord ascended.
When I was talking to you, when I said Ascension, I kind of like, that's interesting. But that's not where the name. I don't know where the name was founded from. I got to ask Fred where but other than climbing, keep
right. As
forward.
An athlete, you want to ascend,
But grew up in a Christian home and a believer, and there's no doubt that any luck we have in this venture is going to be because he put his hand on it. And,
Amen.
But all I prayed for, and I'll mention this because I think it's important. When I was trying to make this gut wrenching decision, when I mentioned your son prayed for me,
Okay, go ahead.
It really just, for me, whether it was your son praying for me or whether it's, there's no doubt this would not happen without God's blessings. And I look back all over my life, and I see it all over my life. And it's just, I prayed for a peace, and that's what he's been giving me. And I'm just grateful for that. And I know he'll bless our path.
Peace of God is your referee. I had a
That's
good
it.
pastor friend tell me that one time.
He's given me that, so
Pastor did.
I'm grateful for that.
We are down to time for prayer. I just do want to mention, I am a pastor. I pastor Freedom Road Christian Ministry. We're at 720 Capitol Circle Northeast. You can find us on the web, frcm.us, if you want to come visit with us. We start 11:05 on Sunday mornings. Also, don't forget to tune in Saturday night, 7 o'clock, for the Saturday Night Gospel Sing. And the daily broadcast Monday through Friday here on 94.1 at 11 o'clock for the daily broadcast and the Saturday edition on Saturday. And you can find me on the podcast if you want to hear this show again. It'll be on the podcast. Type in Pastor Jack King, Tallahassee, and it'll come up. There's all kinds of content for you. And this will be show number 1,213. You might, if you got young people and want to listen to this show, it'll be good for them. So, Father God, I thank you, Lord, for Brother Shane. I thank you, God, for this ministry that you've called them to do. Lord, I pray your blessings upon it. Very needed. Lord God, let your Holy Spirit lead and guide these men and give them decisions that are wise. And Lord, I pray for these young people that come under their influence, and for them and their parents. Lord, we give you glory and praise. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Until next Sunday morning, may the Lord bless you.